I hope that this is the return of something new, because I think it's I think it's due time rather that Battlefield made a return to the shooter space. Granted, a lot has changed across the years, because the fact of the matter is that people are not going to be playing online only games unless they're, free to play and have all of these other elements attached to it, like having a battle royale mode, whatever the heck Fortnite has kind of, I guess, done to the gaming space as a whole and changed the shooter landscape for better and for worse, though I would probably say for the worse, because already we can see stuff like cameos appear in the free-to-play Call of Duty Warzone, for example. So how is Battlefield going to stack up when it returns to the gaming space? Here we have the announcement of Battlefield Labs by EA. And they also dropped a 5-minute trailer here introducing Battlefield Labs, and they renamed the studio to Battlefield Studios, similar in tone to how they renamed 343 into Halo Studios. But the thing about 343 and Halo is that 343 actually ruined Halo to such a magnanimous extent that they almost had like this sort of negative perception about what's going on. And I don't know which studio they exactly renamed to Battlefield Studios, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of what goes on moving forward from that point. But I thought for a second, hold on. Battlefield has been absent in the shooter space for quite some time in terms of the general zeitgeist. Let's actually take a look back at the last 10 years of Battlefield. And honestly, Battlefield 3. People absolutely loved Battlefield 3 and did exceptionally well, both from a critical and user perspective. People loved Battlefield 3. Then we got the announcement and the release of Battlefield 4. Now, this one had an extremely rough launch. It was actually quite buggy and almost borderline unplayable. But the thing is that the patches, the addition of DLCs actually really brought the game up and made it better than Battlefield 3 by the end of its actual support line. Battlefield 4 is probably currently the best Battlefield game that you could play, because I'm pretty sure you can get Battlefield 4 plus all of its DLC for an extremely cheap price, given that the game came out way back in 2013. Then we had Battlefield Hardline, which some might argue is the worst Battlefield game, because they swapped out the concept of modern warfare for urban warfare instead, pitting you as cops and crims. But the thing is that that's only in relation to the campaign, where they tried to make more of a story rather than a bunch of people shooting each other. Because keeping in mind that around the time Battlefield 3 and 4 came out, we saw the release of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2-ish, I want to say, somewhere around that time. And so Hardline had quite a lot to contend with, and honestly the multiplayer was just more free-for-all shooting rather than actually taking on any of the elements in the campaign and bringing it, like the urban warfare cops and crims stuff, into the actual multiplayer. It was just more free-for-all, let's just shoot each other. Then while Call of Duty was going into the future with futuristic warfare like Infinite Warfare, for example, Battlefield went straight to World War I in the form of Battlefield 1, which I would argue is the last good Battlefield game that came out. Because everybody, Battlefield 1 wasn't a Battlefield 3 or 4, but hey, it was still better than Hardline. It stuck to a really good story. Sure, the campaign was incredibly short, but everything was split into like mini war stories across different battalions and platoons across World War I. And World War I was really not a war that was tackled upon. The only unfortunate thing was giving everyone automatic weapons when World War I actually didn't have that. And then we find ourselves with Battlefield 5, which was generally hated quite heavily because they showed off a female soldier in the war, which Sure, they may have been female soldiers, but the thing is that they weren't actually like on the front lines as much as how much they were really pushing that in the marketing of Battlefield 5. But the reason why people really did not like Battlefield 5 was it was trying to ape the concept of what Call of Duty did with Black Ops 4 regarding Blackout mode, which was their what was it called? Battle Royale mode. And so Battlefield 5 tried to do that with Firestorm, but ultimately that completely failed, fell apart, and people just did not like that. Also, it was relatively buggy, similar. So the thing is that Hardline was also kind of buggy, but Battlefield 5 was even buggier. And then we find ourselves at a point where everything is broken and messed up with Battlefield 2042, which everyone just universally hated, and I think we can all say for sure was the worst Battlefield game. So across the last 6 Battlefield games, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and Battlefield 1 were considered to be the good ones. Battlefield Hardline, the second worst one, Battlefield 5, the third worst one, and the worst one of the lot being Battlefield 2042. So if of the last 4 games, 3 of them are the worst Battlefields that we've seen in recent memory, it's probably no wonder that Battlefield hasn't actually seen a new release in quite some time, and you kind of hate to see it, all things considered, but it's actually interesting to see what is happening with Battlefield now, because I feel like they're taking the Battlefield franchise and then Call of Duty-ifying it. What I mean by that is that Activision has every single studio working on Call of Duty. So with Battlefield, it seems like they're trying to recreate the Battlefield of old. Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, trying to recreate that feeling while putting a bunch of studios behind whatever this new Battlefield is going to be. And Battlefield Labs is their EA's way of being able to push, tests out, like beta tests, alpha tests of what they're currently working on, to be able to really play around with the idea of the destruction, the physics. And I think that it's a really good idea that Vince Zampella was actually put on to actually bring Battlefield back from the brink, because keeping in mind that Vince Zampella was part of Respawn, and Respawn did actually make Titanfall, Titanfall 2, and Apex Legends, which were all incredibly successful. So I feel like it's kind of worth sitting down and actually looking at what we've got here at the moment. So, EA revealed Battlefield Studios, the umbrella branding for 4 studios that will be working on the new Battlefield. So specifically, we have the series' main Stockholm, Sweden-based developer DICE, Dead Space Remake and Star Wars Squadron developer Motive, US studio Ripple Effect, formerly known as DICE LA, and UK studio Criterion, whose work on Need for Speed has come to an end. And that's actually incredibly sad to hear that Criterion's work on Need for Speed has kind of stopped, because Criterion does best when it works on vehicular elements in games, because keeping in mind that like Criterion did also help out with Motive, so it makes me wonder the sort of nearly all-star team that they've got going on, because keeping in mind, Motive has made some incredibly good games, like it says here, with Dead Space Remake and Star Wars Squadron. Both of those were really, really good, especially Dead Space Remake. Criterion has done exceptionally well with the Burnout franchise, though granted, that's been so long ago that I doubt we're going to see any new games anytime soon. And while DICE now may not have been the DICE that we've once known, especially during the Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 era, it really does make me wonder where everything is going to fall with this new Battlefield. Ultimately, I am hoping that they do focus a little bit more on the single player while still being able to provide a solid multiplayer experience, because keeping in mind, Battlefield and Call of Duty are really 2 different types of shooters. Call of Duty is everyone running around shooting each other like headless chickens, but Battlefield is having massive wars of 24v24, teams of 2 teams of 24 just coming at each other. It's granted, I think there's also one very important thing to keep in mind, is that Battlefield 2042 kind of took this a little bit too far. Yes, having large amounts of players in a single map is really fun, but the problem is that having too many players causes way too much chaos, and it makes it difficult to really have your entire army kind of go against the opponent. But also, when a map is too large, it feels like everything is placed randomly. The maps were incredibly poorly designed around Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042. 2042. Whereas Battlefield 1 actually had some pretty good maps, and Hardline, while people didn't like the Cops and Crims element, again also had some fairly solid maps. But then when Battlefield 2042 launched the Portal, the Portal mode, which is pretty much what Halo has with Forge, where you can create maps, people actually recreated maps from Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and ultimately that ended up doing better and was more popular and more played, and people loved way more than the actual original maps that were created from Battlefield 2042. So while I'm interested to see where EA goes with everything regarding Battlefield Labs, it's only a matter of time before we see things, bear fruit, hopefully in the not too distant future. But with all that being said though, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year. And with all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.